Okay, Conrad Aiken was born here in Georgia. He was born in Savannah, Georgia in 1889 and died there in 1973, living the first and last 11 years of his life in the same city. In between, he lived in Boston and Britain, and then in Massachusetts again with a stint in Washington, D.C. for his 2 years as our 9th consultant in poetry at the Library of Congress, 1950 to 1952. In 1901, Aiken awoke to the sounds of arguing, followed by gunshots. At age 11, he had to personally discover that his increasingly erratic father had taken his own and Aiken's mother's lives in a murder-suicide. This had a lasting effect. One minor effect of this was that he went to live with relatives up north and wound up attending Harvard University, where he studied under the philosopher George Santayana, and where he met fellow student and subsequent lifelong friend T.S. Eliot. Both of them were permanent and deep, positive and negative influences on Aiken's writing, and in the latter case, the influence was mutual. And another important long-term development that began at Harvard was Aiken's lasting affinity for martinis. Yet another significant influence stemming from that period was his maternal grandfather, William Popper. Aiken came into possession of 2 volumes of the New England Transcendentalist Unitarian Reverend Popper's collected sermons, which Aiken said he valued for their complete liberation from dogma, the determined acceptance of Darwin and all the rest of the scientific fireworks of the 19th century. The scientific fireworks of the 19th century. As you can see, appropriately for a poet, Aiken had a way with a phrase. This extended to his criticism, which the omnipresent Alan Tate called among the best of Aiken's generation. Here is a slightly overheated example regarding a fellow critic named William Braithwaite. Must poetry be all marshmallows and tears? Is it to be prohibited from dealing with ideas, or restricted solely to a contemplation of that small part of our lives which is, in a sentimental sense, beautiful? Is poetry to be merely a perfume reserved for our moments of languor? And he later concluded regarding poor Mr. Braithwaite, shall we never learn that there is nothing mysterious or supernatural about poetry? That it is a natural organic product with discoverable functions clearly open to analysis. It would be a pity if our poets and critics were to leave this to the scientists instead of doing it themselves. Poetical and critical fireworks there. I don't know if that marshmallows and teardrops are the sole concern of poetry any more than are the rainbows and butterflies and My Little Pony that a certain someone borrowed from his sister to write the general blurb introducing the Poets Laureate project a year ago, but I suspect not. As consultant at the library, Aiken oversaw the winding down of the aftermath of the Bowlingen Prize kerfuffle that one of his predecessors, 7th consultant Leonie Adams, had to bear the brunt of. He happily saw the prize off after its one instance of being awarded by the Library of Congress to the notorious Mussolini lover and Jew hater Ezra Pound. Saw it off to Yale University Library, who would 6 years later award Aiken himself the prize. Several of our Poets Laureate were to become Bowlingen recipients once its luster was restored. During his tenure, Conrad Aiken would try to find a way of restoring a shade of function to the poor, castrated felons, as he called them, the fellows of American letters who had voted that inaugural award. It didn't fully work. The fellows would dissipate within a few years, sadly. Now, all this sordidness may become fodder for a future presentation if no one has the sense to stop me right now. Okay. Ask for it. As a last example of Aiken's cantankerous attitude at the Library of Congress, before going on to some short segments of his sometimes very long poems, he said in an interview, I found myself in a battle royal with the bureaucracy from the moment I got there. They were critical of everything I did, even objected to the way I signed letters because I had a habit of putting my signature way out to the right, you see, not under the yours sincerely. And they said, would I please center my signature? So I took pains to put it still further out to the right. One characteristic of Aiken's poetry is that he saw a musical quality, as in this opening stanza, which seems to go over well at the most recent poetry group meeting. Indeed, it was set to music by Leonard Bernstein and other composers. Originally published under the title Discordance, it is now usually referred to by its first line, Music I Heard With You. I'm going to read section 1 of 4. Music I heard with you was more than music, and bread I broke with you was more than bread. And now that I am without you, all is desolate. All that was once so beautiful is dead. Your hands once touched this table and this silver, and I have seen your fingers hold this glass. These things do not remember you, beloved, and yet your touch upon them will not pass. For it was in my heart you moved among them, and blessed them with your hands and with your eyes. And in my heart they will remember always, they knew you once, oh, beautiful and wise. The musical structure in a form similar to that of symphonic movements, suites, and preludes, with repetition and variation, is something that can be found in many of Aiken's poems. And here are 3 chorus-like repetitions plucked from the verses of something called Senlin, a biography, which doesn't seem to have a lot of discoverable functions clearly open to analysis, or to be anything quite so scientific as a conventional biography. These are from section 2 of part 2, His Futile Preoccupations. Vine leaves tap my window, dewdrops sing to the garden stones. The robin sings in the chinaberry tree, repeating 3 clear tones. Vine leaves tap my window, the snail track shines on the stones. Dewdrops flash from the chinaberry tree, repeating 2 clear tones. And then section 2 ends. Vine leaves tap at the window, dewdrops sing to the garden stones, the robin sings in the chinaberry tree, repeating 3 clear tones. If you want to hear Conrad Aiken reading his own poems, go to the link in the comments section of last month's meetup page for Poetry Group. It features, there's a link there. It features 2 short poems and 2 sections of longer ones, totaling less than 15 minutes total. The second one in particular, Sea Holly, becomes a superb example of the repetition and variation working musically, and he can do it better than I can. Another lasting effect of that childhood trauma was a lifelong interest in psychoanalysis. Aiken sought the reconciliation of depth and surface, inner and outer, private and public. It was, he said, as if the conscious and the unconscious were engaged, had always been engaged in a dance, the most intricate and surprising and involved and contrapuntal dances. And as his teacher Santayana put it in his famous essay, The Elements and Functions of Poetry, our logical thoughts dominate experience only as the parallels and meridians make a checkerboard of the sea. They guide our voyage without controlling the waves which toss forever in spite of our ability to ride over them to our chosen ends. Sanity is madness put to good uses. Waking life is a dream controlled. Out of the neglected riches of this dream, the poet fetches his wares. If he seems sometimes to obscure fact, it is only because he is restoring an experience. Conrad Aiken spent a long and productive career working at putting exactly that restoration into his poetry and fiction, a very Freudian concept. Even if it was never truly complete, more than a few of our recently reviewed laureates might have envied Aiken's ability to demonstrate that sustained effort, that was possible, especially despite all those martinis. All the others were, of course, just boring. And everybody, if you're curious as to why someone as boring as a small city doctor, whose initials most folks with a little bit of literary background and interest would automatically recognize, why he represents a speed bump in our journey through the American Poets Laureate, keep yourself abreast of the developments of the future sermons and fireworks at the Poets Laureate Project. Cheers.